Earth Mother, Star Mother, you who are called by 1,000 names, may all remember we are cells in your body and dance together. You are the grain and the loaf that sustains us each day. This comes from a prayer written by an influential pagan activist and writer, Starhawk. And I chose it here as my short letter to the earth because I wanted to talk about Gaia spirituality. Gaia spirituality is a kind of spirituality that developed, or started developing rather, in the 1970s, which combines an ecological perspective with religious symbols, practices, and ideas. Starhawk's prayer mentions grains and likens the earth with a loaf, or calls it the loaf that sustains us. And so it uses a vocabulary which is reminiscent of Christian prayer. Luke Cherub's Gaia invites us to see the earth in a new perspective. Of course, an understanding of the earth as one entity has been there in many religious traditions. Indeed, the name Gaia comes, of course, from the famous Greek goddess, but it was a British scientist and environmentalist, James Lovelock, who in the 1970s first developed the so-called Gaia theory, by which he proposed that the biosphere of the earth functioned like a self-regulating organism. Lovelock's theory created some controversy in the scientific community, particularly his choice of using the name of the Earth Goddess for the biosphere. And of course, the criticism in the scientific community had to do with the religious connotations of this naming of the biosphere. But James Lovelock defended his choice because he explained the Earth needed to be understood as more than just a mixture of living things and inanimate matter. Indeed, it had to be seen as one entity where all these processes of evolution of living matter and inorganic matter were totally inseparable. As a lecturer in religious studies, my own interest has been to look at how different religious communities and individuals have responded or have been impacted by this growing environmental awareness and a greater understanding of climate change and the ecological crisis for which, of course, we humans are responsible. And I have been interested in looking at the impact of these new ecological and scientific perspectives on various religious traditions, and particularly Christianity, but also Islam and contemporary spirituality more broadly. An important critique from many environmentalists, notoriously from the historian Lynn White Jr. in the late 1960s and many others who followed in his steps, was leveled at Christianity. Since Christianity has been an influential world religion that the critique said displaced more ecological worldviews with a more anthropocentric or human-centered understanding of the world. And according to these critics, this human-centered worldview is very much, or it's very obviously there in the Judeo-Christian story of creation, where humans represent the highest point of creation and are given dominion over the rest of creation. Now, of course, there have been a diversity of religious responses to environmental critiques, as well as responses to the environmental crisis. And among this diversity of religious responses has been contemporary pagans, especially here in Britain, who are able to truly express a new relationship with the earth through artworks and music and prayers, by understanding the earth as goddess and being at the forefront of the goddess spirituality I mentioned, a spirituality that has really penetrated the mainstream to the point where it is quite normal today to talk about Mother Earth. My own research with Green Christians shows that equally powerful religious responses have come from the Christian tradition to prayers, vigils, and a dedicated climate activism, by which activists are stressing that the earth belongs to God, and so it is our obligation as stewards of the earth to protect the earth and protect it as a sacred place and as God's creation. So as I reflected on Lux Jerram's Gaia, I thought about how old and new religious traditions have been and continue to be incredibly influential in how we see the earth and consequently how we relate and respond to the earth.